The First Gulf War, the coalition's defeat of Saddam Hussein. It was the conflict that shook the world. The First Gulf War was once a struggle that pitted the forces of the United States-led coalition against the ruthless regime of Saddam Hussein. For months, the world watched in horror as the two facets clashed in a lethal conflict for manipulation of one of the most oil-rich areas on Earth. But how did this conflict begin? What have been the stakes? And how did the coalition subsequently emerge victorious, altering the path of records forever? In this video, we will discover the occasions that led to the First Gulf War, the key gamers in each aspect, and the techniques and methods that subsequently led to the coalition's defeat of Saddam Hussein. So buckle up, due to the fact we're about to take you on a ride into one of the most pivotal moments in modern history. In the early hours of August 2, 1990, Iraqi forces invaded Kuwait, a tiny oil-rich country on Iraq's southern border. The swift and brutal occupation caught the world off the shield and set off a chain of occasions that would lead to the First Gulf War. Saddam Hussein, Iraq's dictator, had lengthy harbored ambitions of regional dominance, and Kuwait's oil reserves introduced an irresistible target. The global neighborhood rapidly condemned Iraq's actions, and the United Nations surpassed a collection of resolutions calling for Iraq's withdrawal from Kuwait. When Iraq failed to comply, the UN licensed the formation of a coalition to implement the resolutions by way of military force. The coalition was once led by the United States, which deployed over 500,000 troops to the region, along with a vast array of military hardware. Other nations, along with the United Kingdom, France, and Saudi Arabia, also contributed troops and resources. The coalition's military buildup used to be huge and unprecedented, with troops and gear pouring into the location at a stunning rate. The US-led coalition's approach used to be easy, however effective, to use overwhelming pressure to liberate Kuwait and pressure Iraqi forces again throughout their border. The coalition's military buildup and deployment of forces shortly caught the interest of the world, and tensions rose as the cutoff date for Iraq's withdrawal from Kuwait approached. As the coalition's army may come to be increasingly more apparent, Saddam Hussein's rhetoric grew an increasing number of defiant. In January 1991, with diplomatic efforts having failed, the coalition launched a large air campaign in opposition to Iraq, starting the First Gulf War in earnest. The coalition's buildup of military forces in the vicinity used to be remarkable in its scale and speed. In simply a few months, lots of troops and a huge array of military hardware had been deployed to the region. The US sent over 500,000 troops, along with tanks, planes, and different equipment. Other coalition members, such as the UK, France, and Saudi Arabia, also contributed giant military resources. The coalition's approach to the battle was once targeted by the usage of overwhelming pressure to shortly liberate Kuwait and force Iraqi forces to return through their border. The preliminary segment of the hostilities was once a big air campaign, with coalition planes launching a relentless assault on Iraqi military targets. The aim used to be to soften up Iraqi defenses and pave the way for a ground invasion. The air campaign was a critical component of the First Gulf War, and the coalition's use of air strength was once a game changer. The coalition's planes utilized precision-guided munitions and stealth technology to goal key military and infrastructure ambitions in Iraq. The air marketing campaign used to be big and relentless, with coalition planes launching hundreds of sorties and shedding hundreds of lots of bombs on Iraqi targets. The influence of the air campaign on Iraqi military skills used to be devastating. Iraqi air defenses had been rapidly overwhelmed, and the coalition's planes had been capable to strike with impunity at military objectives in the course of the country. Key military installations and infrastructure, such as bridges and strength plants, had been closely broken or destroyed. The function of coalition allies in the air marketing campaign was once also critical. Arab nations, consisting of Saudi Arabia and Kuwait, supplied critical logistical guides and allowed coalition forces to use their air bases for launching operations. While the air campaign was once a quintessential thing of the First Gulf War, the ground warfare used to be the place the coalition's overwhelming superiority in firepower and technological know-how used to be most evident. The coalition's floor forces consisted of a vast array of tanks, artillery, and different equipment, alongside pretty trained troops. The floor battle commenced with a large armored assault on Iraqi positions in Kuwait. The coalition's tanks and different armored automobiles rapidly overwhelmed Iraqi defenses, and coalition troops hastily superior towards Kuwait City. However, the Iraqi army was once a ways from being defeated, and fierce struggle persisted at some point in the floor war. One of the most difficult factors of floor warfare used to be the harsh wasteland environment. The coalition's troops had to contend with severe heat, sandstorms, and different environmental challenges. Still, the coalition's finest science and firepower proved decisive, and the floor struggle ended with a resounding victory for the coalition forces. One of the most extraordinary components of the First Gulf War was once Saddam Hussein's use of Scud missiles in opposition to coalition forces and Israeli cities. Despite the coalition's overwhelming army superiority, Saddam's Scud attacks caused significant fear and anxiety among coalition troops and civilians. The Scud missiles had been an ancient Soviet design, however, Saddam had changed them to enlarge their vary and accuracy. The missiles have been launched from cell launchers, making them challenging to target, and they had been outfitted with traditional warheads. While the Scud missiles brought about fantastically little harm to coalition forces, they did purpose great disruption and psychological stress. Coalition troops had to continuously be on defense against the opportunity of Scud attacks, and civilians in Israel lived in worry of the subsequent missile strike. The coalition launched a huge effort to ruin Saddam's Scud launchers, however, it proved challenging to remove the threat. The principal goal of the coalition's army marketing campaign was once the liberation of Kuwait, and this goal used to be finished with resounding success. The coalition's overwhelming army superiority proved decisive, and the Iraqi military used to be shortly defeated. The liberation of Kuwait was once no longer barring its challenges, however. Fierce combat persevered during the ground war, and coalition troops had to contend with the harsh wasteland surroundings and the risk of Scud attacks. Still, the coalition's method of the usage of overwhelming pressure proved successful, and Kuwait used to be liberated in simply a few weeks. The liberation of Kuwait was once an enormous victory for the coalition, and it marked the first time considering World War II that a state had been efficaciously liberated from overseas occupation. The First Gulf War had sizable penalties for Iraq, the Middle East, and the world. Saddam Hussein's defeat was once an extensive blow to his regime, and it marked a turning point in the history of Iraq. However, the battle also had sizable humanitarian consequences, with many civilians killed or displaced by way of the conflict. The aftermath of the First Gulf War also set the stage for future conflicts in the region, inclusive of the US-led invasion of Iraq in 2003. The struggle had sizable geopolitical consequences, with the US rising as a dominant military power in the place and the worldwide neighborhood re-evaluating its strategy to Iraq and different Middle Eastern nations. The First Gulf War also had great implications for the use of military pressure in the post-Cold War era. The success of the coalition's army marketing campaign led many to agree with that military pressure may want to be a fantastic device for accomplishing political objectives, in particular when used by using a powerful coalition of nations. However, the war also raised vital questions about the limits of army strength and the practicable unintended consequences. In the years following the First Gulf War, Iraq remained a most important supplier of instability in the region, with Saddam Hussein's regime persevering to pose a hazard to regional balance and worldwide security. The UN imposed financial sanctions on Iraq, which had a devastating impact on the country's economic system and civilian population. The legacy of the First Gulf War continues to be debated and analyzed with the aid of scholars, policymakers, and the established public. While the battle was once profitable in accomplishing its on-the-spot objectives, it also had huge long-term consequences, each for Iraq and the wider Middle East region. The First Gulf War confirmed the effectiveness of military pressure when used by using an effective coalition of nations. However, it also raised necessary questions about the limits of military power and the practicability for unintended consequences. The legacy of the hostilities continues to be debated and analyzed, and its effect on the Middle East and the world will be felt for many years to come. If you enjoyed this video and would like to learn more about history, please subscribe to our channel, The History Hub. We post new videos every week covering a wide range of historical topics. By subscribing, you'll be the first to know when we release new content, and you'll be supporting us in our mission to bring history to life. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to seeing you in the next video.